Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Elevate Your Wellbeing podcast. It is episode 26. And we have a lovely, lovely first quarter moon in a sign of Virgo. I think it's tomorrow as this episode goes up live. Yeah, tomorrow. So Virgo is all about health, well-being, and the topic that we are going to chat about today, this week, is cyclical self-care, working with your cycle and how you can honor that ebb and flow in your cycle with your self-care. So, yes, this is very much focused on women. If you are cycling, it will be a little bit more heightened. But even if you no longer actually have your typical bleed, that menstruation, you will still get that cycle of your ebb and flow. So do still listen to this one. It is a really interesting topic, and it's actually something I've been sitting on for a while. I've tracked my cycle very, not intensely, but really proactively, really specifically for quite a while now. And I love working with the cycles of the moon. And you'll notice as you listen to this, we're on episode 26. So we've been going for a while now, and you'll notice that I always highlight the cycle of the moon, and we have that cycle within us as well. So before I dive into the topic, before we sit down and have our weekly discussion, do make sure that you've grabbed your journal. There will always be a journal prompt at the end of the episode. Do make sure you have some water, and hopefully you're near a lovely body of natural light. So whether, like me, as I'm recording this, I'm sitting by the huge big window that I have my desk by, so I'm getting natural light. Maybe you're outside, you're moving your body. And do share, if you're wherever you're at, do share where you are listening to the podcast and tag me. I do love to see where you're listening to these. It is really, really lovely to be in this discussion together. And I do really, really love that. So let's dive into this topic, because it is really huge. As women, we have that typically that 28-day cycle. Yours might be a little bit longer, might be a little bit shorter. I think mine is around the 26 to 29 day. So it does fluctuate. And we live in a world of cycles. We have the cycle of the moon, which again is a very typical 28-day cycle. We have the cycle of the seasons, spring, summer, autumn, winter. And we also have the cycle of how we flow hormonally, whether we're menstruating, whether we're ovulating. And then there's the two in between. And I very much feel that's how we can feel about the moon, especially when we're new to tracking and cycling with the moon. We're aware of new moon, menstruation. We're aware of full moon, ovulation, but we're not necessarily aware of that first quarter and last quarter energy. And knowing these series of patterns and events really can help us energetically. And as I teach yoga, and I've done this for a number of years now, I've linked in the cycle of the moon, and I really do like to highlight it. And sometimes we're out of sync with that. So if you bleed on the new moon, then you'll very much feel that new moon energy, where you do just want to be nice and slow, and we go through restorative practices. And sometimes we crave that restorative practice and we're ovulating, no, sorry, and we're menstruating, and we might be doing that around the full moon. Now, sometimes if you're not in harmony with your cycle, as you're ovulating, you might crave a nice restorative practice, especially if you have things like endometriosis or anything that really affects you and your cycle and your energy. So it can be really interesting to track your cycle, and lots of different things can really impact this. And if you are really intrigued on this, this can be something we can go into deeper with regards to your well-being and starting to track your cycle. If you have got any other things going on, then I would say do this alongside working with a functional medicine doctor, so they can really help you as well. Because there's lots of different things that you can do depending on what's your deal in, what you love to work with. I do really feel there can be that balance with holistic and general or Western medicine, as you want, whatever you want to call it. So just like the moon has those phases, those cycles, we have our own as well. And you can really take advantage of this and really work with what feels best for you. So if you do follow me on social media, I've been chatting more about batching, and this is so powerful, especially as a business owner. And obviously I can only really talk about this as a business owner because that is what I am, that is who I am. So that's how I'm going to view this. But I know when I'm at a certain point in my cycle, I really, really don't want to show up and do these podcasts. I really don't want to show up on social media. I don't always want to do the teaching, but there are elements that I can batch and go, right, that's where my energy is at its highest. That's where my energy is at its peak. And I really enjoy putting that energy into the podcast. I love doing this. And when I can do that at my best, why not do more of it? So batching really, really helps. And I can go, that's when I can do that. And then you could do the same. When you know your cycle, you can then look at your diary, you can look at your calendar and really try and be strategic when you plan out your day. And obviously you might have restrictions on this if you are in a job, but if you have any idea of how you can work your calendar, that there'll be a certain time in your cycle where you are more than happy to be social, and you could be planning your diary when you're in that social mood. Oh yeah, let's do that in 2 weeks' time. And then 2 weeks roll around and you're menstruating. You're like, I really don't want to do that. So knowing that means that you can do what you love to do when you feel at your best to do it. And you don't feel guilty when you then have to cancel or you're not at your best because you haven't scheduled it for that time. So it can be really, really important and really empowering to schedule and that time to track your cycle. And you can use trackers for this. There's apps to do this. I journal. So I actually have 4 different color inks. The pen where you have the 4 different colors and you can push one color down and that's the pen nib that comes through. I use that. And depending on where I'm at in my cycle, obviously red for menstruation. I tend to do green for when I'm ovulating and, and then use the other 2 for the others. But I can then highlight that and I then put the number where I'm at in my journal with regards to my cycle. Now, obviously, day 1 is your first day of bleeding, and that's when you start your menstruation. That's the start of your cycle. And you can start to track this and see how it feels in your energy. So I'm going to pick out just a couple of self-care practices that you can do for each self-care phase and see what really works best for you. And there's lots of different ways that we can do this. So do have a look at charting it and then chart it with the moon, and it will move. It is interesting how it does move around. So see and honor how that feels for you and see if you can make a note of when the moon is. And obviously, if you're listening to this as this goes out, you'll know what the moon phase cycle is. So right now it's first quarter moon. And like I said, it's in the sign of Virgo. Virgo loves health and well-being. So it felt apt and on time to do this particular topic now. So let's have a little dive in. So one of the journals I use is the Magic of I journal, and they do highlight the menstrual cycles and the moon. And I love how they break them down. So we have the menstrual phase, the follicular, ovulation, and luteal. And they actually break it down in a slightly different way. So your menstruation cycle is when you're in a reflective period. So this energy is a yin energy, which is why we want to be going into a restorative practice. It's known as the new moon time, and the season is winter. So you're kind of going within. It's that time of hibernation, it can feel like. And I'll go through some of the self-care and I'll come back through this as we go back through. I just want to quickly go through, and then you have the follicular. So this energy is when you're moving from yin into yang. So a little bit more energy is coming through. This would be linked to the first quarter moon. And this is your spring. You then have your ovulation. So this is a very yang energy, full moon and summer. And then you have your luteal, which is the yang moving into yin. So going back towards restorative, the third quarter moon. And this is your autumn. So during your menstruation cycle, that new moon, this is when we want to rest. So restorative, yin yoga, using all the props, meditation, reflection. This is a really beautiful time to really like soak in the bath and have that nice warm bath, and honoring that this time your energy levels are going to be lower. This is the time when you're going to be wanting to eat the dark chocolate and just enjoy cups of teas and just feel very nurtured. When we move into our next season, so we have our reflective phase for the menstruation. Our next season is the more dynamic phase, the follicular. So yin moving into yang, first quarter moon, this is your spring. So we can slowly start to ease into activity. It's a really good idea to start setting new goals at this time because you're more proactive, you're a little bit more focused, you've had that reflection, and now you can be a bit more proactive. This could even be when you start trying new hobbies. You can channel your creativity because that energy is coming out. You may feel that you want to support others. You're able to support others more emotionally than you were, say, a week ago. And just allowing yourself to go with the flow. So logical tasks and problem solving, great at this phase. Having adventures and working together, support, but allowing space for others at the same time. Like I said, starting something new, really, really good at this phase. When you're moving through ovulation, so this is your expressive phase, when we're in that yang energy, the full moon, you're in your height of summer. So this is when you're wanting to, or hopefully you've got all that energy, so you're wanting to move. So this is a good time to sweat it out. So you're going to be more social. You're going to be a little bit more physical with your partner, or to yourself if that's where you're at in your life, depending on if you have that physical partner. This is a really good time to sweat it out. So those high intensity workouts, really, 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 really good at this time. So fun times. This is when you're going to be wanting to be social. So like I said, when you're looking at your calendar, if you're feeling like you want to book out all the things, this is probably in you're probably in your ovulation phase as you're booking all the things. And if you're booking it for 2 weeks out, make a note that you're most likely to be menstruating. You're not going to want to be as social. So check when you're ovulating. So you're around day 14 to 21 at this phase. This is when you're going to be wanting to be social. This is when it's really good to work with teams, romance and passion time. You could go dancing. This is when you're going to want to go to things like hot yoga and yeah, just really enjoying life. I always find this is a really good time for batching as well, because you've got that energy to do it. And then we move into the luteal phase, which is the creative phase. This is days 21 to 28. And obviously, this is going to vary depending on how long or short your cycle is. Some people will be 26, 27, which I can be sometimes. Some people will be 30, 32. So this is as your energy is starting to wane. And this would be when you're wanting to start to slow down. So you might be going for more gentle movements. So this is when yoga and Pilates are really, really beautiful practices to do at this time. Especially if you really like those higher intensive workouts. Even working with weights can be really good. This is a really good time to lift heavier in your weight training session. So do check in with that. If you do weight training, one, fabulous. Two, really check in with where you are at. When do you find it easier to lift heavy? And it most likely is around this luteal phase, at 21 to 28 days in your cycle. This could be when you're wanting to start slowing down. So sometimes as you're getting closer to your menstruation, this is when you start craving time on the sofa, watching your favorite movie. Honor it. If that's where you're at in your cycle, honor it, because you know it's going to ebb and flow. So practicing being present, being open, loving and understanding those ups and downs. This is when flowers and chocolate, receiving that can feel really lovely and supportive, because you know that you're going to be wanting to go into that cave soon. So honoring that flow, and we do live in a world where it is 24 hours a day, that 24-hour cycle. And it's hard when you have a 28-day cycle to really honor it when you feel like it's a new day and you should be doing, the same thing you were doing yesterday with the same energy and enthusiasm, which is really tricky to do when every day is slightly different, every week is very different when you have this cycle. So do really reflect and honor how you feel with your energy every single day, every single week, and use this as a tool, a practice to help you understand and honor that, especially with your self-care. What are you craving? And a client of mine in the Wellbeing membership said this recently. She was like, I really craved the restorative, and I saw there was a restorative practice, but then I also saw there was a strength practice, and I went for that, and oh my God, I ached for days. And part of me's like, I wonder whether it is that, if you're doing something you feel you should do, like a strengthening practice, at a time when you really need the restorative practice, do we get those like DOMS, that delayed onset of muscle soreness, more when we're doing it at a time in our cycle when we really need the restorative practice? So if this is something you are intrigued on, if this is something you would love for me to share more on social media, if you'd like me to talk about it a little bit more on the podcast, or if you would like to dive into this for yourself and have that support with tracking your cycle and seeing how you can really nurture and nourish yourself around your cycle, do get in touch. All the details are in the show notes as to whether you want to get in touch. So you've got my email there to contact me directly. You can send me a DM on Instagram, tag me if you would like to work with me as your coach one-on-one. The details are in the show notes, so you can book your initial coaching session, and then that opens you up to my private diary, and we can book in through a 3-month or 6-month container. And again, you can do that on a cycle. So if you do the 3-month and you suddenly realize, actually, I wanted to go for longer, then you could do another 3 months, or you can then open it up to 6 months. That's really up to you with how I can support you. And I'm going to leave you with this episode with your journal prompt. And quite simply, how can you start tracking your cycle? How can you honor that ebb and flow in your energy?